The day a nurse slipped me a folded note in the emergency room, I thought my only job was to keep my son awake. My name is Rachel Hart. I was 34 years old, a school librarian, and the mother of a 7-year-old boy named Noah. That afternoon, I sat hunched in a plastic chair beside a hospital bed, counting every second between my son's blinks. "Stay with me, buddy," I whispered, brushing sweaty hair off his forehead. "Keep those eyes open." He tried to smile, but the motion tugged at the swelling near his temple. "My head hurts, Mom," he said, voice too small. "I know," I said, fighting the wobble in my own. "The doctor's going to help. Just a little longer, okay?" On the other side of the bed, my husband Mark scrolled on his phone, thumb moving with the bored precision of someone killing time in a line, not someone whose child had just fallen hard enough to need a CT scan. He looked exactly the way he always did, press shirt, hair neat, wedding ring glinting under fluorescent lights. If you didn't know us, you would have thought we were a normal, worried family. Then the nurse came back. She checked Noah's vitals again, speaking softly to him. Her badge read Megan, RN, late 20s, dark blonde hair pulled back in a bun, kind eyes with faint shadows under them. "How are you doing, kiddo?" she asked. "Tired," he mumbled. She nodded, adjusting the monitor. "That's okay. We're keeping a close eye on you," she said. "The doctor will be here soon to talk about your scan." Then she glanced at me just for a second too long. There was something in her expression I couldn't place. Pity, maybe, or decision. "Mrs. Hart," she said, "can I grab you a coffee? Or water? You look like you could use something." "That would be great," I said automatically, because mothers are trained to say yes to anything that might help us stay upright. She left, her clogs squeaking down the hall. Mark didn't look up. "You should try not to baby him," he said. "He just took a spill. Kids fall. It happens." "He has a concussion," I said quietly. "You don't know that," Mark replied. "You always jump to worst-case scenarios. It's dramatic." I swallowed whatever I wanted to say. This wasn't the time. A few minutes later, Nurse Megan came back with a styrofoam cup. "Here you go," she said, holding it out. Our fingers brushed as I took it. I felt something else pressed against my palm. Thin, papery. I frowned. When she turned to adjust Noah's 4, I slipped my hand into my pocket and unfolded what she had given me. It was a small piece of hospital chart paper, torn from a pad. On it, in quick, slanted handwriting, were 4 words. "Check the hallway camera." Beneath that, in smaller letters, "Ask security. Don't tell him." A line of cold ran down my spine. I looked up, heart pounding, and found Megan already watching me. Her eyes flicked once, fast toward Mark, still engrossed in his phone, then back to me. Just like that, the world shifted. I didn't know what she'd seen, but I knew with terrifying clarity that this day was not going to be just about a head injury. It was going to be the day I finally saw, with my own eyes, what my husband had been turning my life into. Before that note, before the hospital corridor and the flickering fluorescent lights, I thought I understood the shape of my marriage. Not perfectly, not like those couples who finish each other's sentences on Facebook, but enough. I knew Mark could be controlling. I knew he liked things his way. I knew he thought my job was cute rather than crucial, but I also knew he kissed Noah's forehead goodnight, that he paid the mortgage on time, that he bought me a new car when mine died, with a bow and everything, saying, "You deserve something reliable." I told myself that every relationship was a compromise, that my parents' perfect marriage had also been full of small, unspoken resentments. So when Mark's red flags showed up, not as screaming sirens, but as slow, quiet patterns, I folded them into the background noise and called it normal. We had met 10 years earlier at a friend's barbecue. I was 24 then. fresh out of grad school, still paying off student loans, and figuring out how to make a library feel like a place teenagers wanted to be instead of a prison of silence. Mark was 27, working in corporate sales for a medical device company. He had the kind of confidence that takes up a whole doorway. Tan, athletic, a laugh that turned heads. He offered to refill my drink. He asked what I did. When I said, high school librarian, he grinned. So you're the gatekeeper of knowledge, he said. I like that. We talked about books and movies, and how both of us hated olives. It was easy. He made me feel seen in a way that past boyfriends hadn't. On our third date, he showed up with flowers and tickets to a concert. No one's ever done something like this for me. I'd said, half dazzled. Get used to it, he replied, brushing a strand of hair from my face. You're with a man who knows how to take care of his girl. My mother loved him instantly. He's so polite, she whispered after the first dinner. And he has a good job, Rachel. Stability matters. Stability, security, words that had loomed large in my upbringing, where money was always tight, and we'd lost my dad too early to a heart attack. Mark seemed like the answer to that fear. He always picked up the check. He drove. He fixed things. He told me not to worry about bills. I've got it handled. When I got pregnant with Noah 2 years into our marriage, Mark took my hands and spun me around the kitchen, laughing. This kid is going to have everything, he said. Everything I didn't have. We're going to do it right. And for a while, it felt like we did. He was attentive in the delivery room, cutting the cord with tears in his eyes. He stayed up with me during those first brutal newborn weeks, rocking Noah so I could shower. He took pictures of us, posted them with captions like, "My whole world." It was only later, gradually, quietly, that the other side emerged. It started with time. When Noah was a toddler, Mark's job suddenly required more client dinners, more overnight conferences. He'd leave in a crisp shirt and come home late smelling like some expensive hotel soap and whiskey. If I asked how it went, he'd give vague stories about networking and industry talk, and then change the subject. You wouldn't find it interesting, he'd say, not unkindly, but with a finality that told me questions were unwelcome. Then came the comments. Little digs disguised as jokes. You know you're bad with numbers? Ratch. Just let me handle the finances. You're great with kids. That's your thing. Let me worry about the serious stuff. Your job is cute. But let's be honest, my income is what keeps us in this neighborhood. On their own, each remark was small. Together, they built a wall. I stopped asking to see the full bank statements. If he said, "The credit card bill was a bit high this month. We need to tighten our belts," I just nodded and put back the nice shampoo in favor of generic. When I mentioned wanting to go back to school for a counseling certificate, he made a face. "Why rack up more debt?" he said. "We're fine. And who's going to be with Noah if you're taking night classes? You said you didn't want him in daycare. All day." He made it sound so reasonable, like he was protecting both of us. I let the idea go. Noah grew. He was a bright, sensitive kid, a little clumsy, always covered in grass stains, obsessed with dinosaurs and space, the kind of boy who cried when cartoon animals got hurt. He adored his dad. When Mark came home, Noah ran to the door, launching himself into his arms. "You're my hero, Daddy," he'd say. Mark glowed under that adoration. He taught Noah how to throw a ball, how to ride a bike, how to say, "Yes, sir," and "No, ma'am," with perfect politeness. I watched them together and felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Pride, yes, but also distance. They had their world. Sports, superhero movies, video games. I had reading time, homework, doctor appointments. "We make a good team," Mark would say, kissing my cheek as he headed out to yet another client dinner. I told myself he was right. The first time Noah came home with an odd bruise, I noticed but didn't panic. He was 5, then. He'd just spent the weekend at his grandparents' house, Mark's parents, where they had a big backyard and a tire swing he loved. He bounded through the door on Sunday night, cheeks flushed with leftover excitement. "Mom, Papa let me help feed the chickens," he yelled, kicking off his shoes. "Wow," I said. "Did the chickens like you?" "They loved me," he said seriously, "but I fell off the stairs." He pointed to his arm, where a purplish mark bloomed just below the shoulder. I winced. "Ouch, buddy, that looks like it hurt." "It's okay," he said quickly, glancing toward Mark, who was unpacking a bag behind him. I was being dumb. It wasn't anybody's fault. The speed of that assurance lodged in my mind. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, I said, "Your parents must have felt awful about the fall." Mark shrugged. "Kids fall," he said. "You're the one who's always freaking out about every little bump." "I'm not freaking out," I said. "I just want to know what happened." He sighed. "My dad said he slipped on the back steps," he said. "He cried for 5 seconds and then got distracted by the chickens. It's nothing. Don't turn it into a thing." I let it drop. But after that, I started paying closer attention. A small cut on Noah's lip after a roughhousing game with Mark. A finger sprain from play wrestling. Always accidents. Always framed as Noah's fault for being too wild, too excited, too clumsy. "Boys get beat up," Mark would say. "You babied him for too long." I tried to tell myself he was right, until the night of the playground incident. A month before the hospital note, I got a call at work. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the lull between lunch and last period. The library hummed quietly with students pretending to study and secretly scrolling their phones. The caller ID flashed Noah's school. "Mrs. Hart," the secretary said when I answered. "This is Janet at the front office." Noah took a tumble on the playground. "He's okay, but he bumped his head. The nurse wants you to take a look when you pick him up, just in case." My heart jumped. "I'll come now," I said. At the school, the nurse, Mrs. Collins, showed me a red mark just above Noah's ear. "He says he fell off the climbing wall," she said. "He didn't lose consciousness. No nausea. Pupils look fine. I think he's okay. But if he complains of a headache or seems off later, you might want to have him seen." On the drive home, I asked Noah what happened. "I slipped," he said. "Were you alone?" I asked, "Was anyone with you?" He hesitated. "Dad said not to make a big deal," he muttered. "Dad." I repeated. "He wasn't at school." "No, but..." He trailed off, chewing his lip. "But what, honey?" I asked. He stared out the window. "Nothing. I fell. It was my fault," he said finally. That night, when Mark came home, I mentioned it. He frowned. "You took him to the nurse for that," he said, looking at the fading mark. "She called me," I said, "and she said if he seemed off to get him checked. People need to stop teaching kids to be fragile." He said, "It's a scrape, Rachel. You're going to make him anxious about every little thing." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. I decided then I'd start writing things down, not as evidence, just as a record. Playground fall. Tuesday, Nurse Collins called. Mark dismissive. A lot of women do that without quite knowing why. A private log of things that don't feel big enough to fight about yet, but don't feel entirely right either. I couldn't have known then how important that habit would become. The day of the head injury that landed us in the hospital, Noah wasn't with me. It was Mark's Saturday. After some back and forth and a trial separation we were pretending wasn't one, we'd fallen into an informal arrangement. Noah spent every other weekend at Mark's parents' house with him. We hadn't gone to court. I kept hoping we'd patch things up before it came to that. Mark picked Noah up that morning at 9, kissed my cheek, said we could take him full time. "You know, if you need a break." I'd smiled tightly. "I don't need a break from my son," I said. I need a break from pretending everything between us is fine. His jaw twitched. Well, that's dramatic, he muttered. We'll be back Sunday. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Mark. I answered on the first ring. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Everything okay? Yeah, he said, breathless. I heard wind noise, maybe from outside. Well, not exactly. Noah took a bad fall. He hit his head on the back patio. He got dizzy for a second. I'm taking him to County General just to be sure. My stomach sank. How bad? I asked. Is he awake? Did he throw up? He's awake, Mark said quickly. He's fine. He's talking. But you know how you are about head things. I figured you'd want us to get him checked. He wasn't wrong. I'm meeting you there, I said, already grabbing my keys. No need, he said. I've got it handled. I'm meeting you there, I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. He sighed. Fine. Whatever. We're heading in now. I'll text you which room we get. 20 minutes later, I was sprinting through the sliding doors of the emergency department, smelling disinfectant and fear. I found them in a curtained bay. Noah lay on the narrow bed, small hospital gown swallowing his frame, a bandage wrapped around his head. Mark stood beside him, looking appropriately concerned. Mom, Noah said when he saw me, relief flashing across his face. I kissed his hand. I heard you scared your dad half to death, I said, forcing a smile. I'm sorry, he murmured. You don't ever have to apologize for getting hurt. I said, that's Dad's job, right? To panic. Mark barked a small laugh. See, he said, she's making jokes. It's not a big deal. The triage nurse came in then, Megan, with brisk efficiency, checking vitals, asking questions. How long was he dizzy? She asked. A couple minutes. Mark said. Did he lose consciousness at any point? She asked. No, Mark said quickly. Noah hesitated. I got sleepy, he murmured, but I don't think I fell asleep. Megan's eyes sharpened. All right, she said calmly. We're going to get a scan, just to be safe. She left. 5 minutes later, she came back with that coffee and the note. Staring at those hastily written words, check the hallway camera. Ask security. Don't tell him. I felt like someone had dropped me into ice water. Nurses don't pass secret notes to parents for fun. Something had happened in this hospital that she needed me to see. Something involving Mark. I folded the paper back up, slid it deeper into my pocket, forced my face into something resembling normal. Everything okay? Mark asked, finally glancing up from his phone. Yeah, I said. Just tired. He nodded, already half distracted. I'm going to go call my mom, he said. Let her know we're here. She'll freak out if she finds out later. Sure, I said. Tell her I said hi. He left the curtained area, phone to his ear. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, I looked at Noah. Hey, buddy, I said softly. When you fell, were you scared? He nodded. Did Dad get scared too? I asked. He bit his lip. He yelled. He said I was being stupid. Said if I told you I was on the wall, you'd make it a big drama. My throat tightened. What wall? I asked. He stared at his hands. Nothing, he said quickly. I fell. That's all. I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I slipped out into the hallway and headed toward the nurse's station. Megan was there, entering notes into a computer. She looked up as I approached. Can we talk? I asked quietly. She nodded, eyes flicking briefly toward the direction Mark had gone. In here, she said, guiding me into a small supply closet/charting room and closing the door. What did you see? I asked, the words tumbling out. What is this about a camera? She exhaled. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she said. We're not supposed to get involved in family stuff unless it's clear abuse. But I've been a PEDS nurse for 6 years. I trust my gut. My heart hammered. Please, I said, just tell me. She leaned back against a shelf of bandage boxes. When you first came in, she said, I was at the triage desk. There's a camera feed that shows the main hallway where the beds are. It's mostly for safety, so we can see if a patient gets up or a kid tries to wander off. I nodded. About 15 minutes ago, she continued, I saw your husband step out of the bay while you were in the restroom. He looked around like he was checking if anyone was watching. Then he closed the curtain almost all the way. Her face tightened. That's usually a bad sign. So I glanced at the monitor. I could see part of the bed through the gap. She swallowed. He leaned over your son, she said, his face very close. I couldn't hear what he was saying from the station, but I could see Noah's expression. He looked terrified. Your husband jabbed a finger near his face. Then I saw Noah start to cry. My hands clenched. I went in, she said, businesslike, just checking vitals. Your husband straightened up fast, all smiles. But I saw enough. Your son wiped his eyes really quick, like he didn't want me to notice. She met my eyes. I asked him. She said, casually, what happened to your head, kiddo? He opened his mouth, looked at your husband, and shut it again. Your husband answered for him. He fell on the patio. He said, very firm. Okay, I said slowly. But that's not all, she cut in. Later, when I was changing his pulse ox, I asked again, just the two of us. Did you really fall on the patio? He looked conflicted, and then he whispered, Daddy said if I tell anyone I was on the wall, I'll get in trouble, and you'll be mad, and I'll have to live somewhere else. The room spun. He said that. I whispered. She nodded. I asked what wall, she said. He said, the high one Dad told me not to climb. Then he clammed up, said he'd get in trouble for telling. She took a breath. I can't prove your husband pushed him. She said, but I could tell your son is being coached to stick to a story. And when I checked the hallway camera playback from just now, it recorded that moment when your husband was leaning over him, talking hard into his face. The audio is faint, but you can make some of it out. Enough that security flagged it as concerning. I felt nauseous. You're saying there's a recording? I asked. Yes, she said. Our main lobby/hall cameras loop after a few days, but the pediatric hallway feed stores longer. If you ask security to pull the clip from 15 minutes ago from camera 3, they can. You're his mom. You have that right. Will they just give it to me? I asked. Maybe not directly, she said, but if you say you have concerns about someone coaching your child about how he got hurt, they're mandated to involve our social worker. And once a social worker is involved with that kind of allegation, she let the sentence hang. The implications hit me hard. If I made a report, this wouldn't just be between me and Mark. It could become a custody issue, a CPS issue, a court issue. Part of me recoiled. Another part, the same part that had been quietly logging falls and comments and bruises for the past year, sat up. Why the note? I asked. Why tell me not to say anything to him yet? Because men like your husband, she began, then stopped herself. Because some people, when they feel a situation slipping, escalate. They get louder, more aggressive. If he knows you're onto him before you have anything solid, he can say you're hysterical. He can claim you're making things up. He could even try to get ahead of you and call CPS himself, paint you as unstable. She met my gaze, eyes fierce. I've seen it too many times. She said, women doubting their instincts until it's too late. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. If that were my son, I'd want the footage before I confronted anyone. My whole body was buzzing like my nerves were electric wires. Thank you, I said, voice shaking. Thank you for telling me. She nodded. I'll keep an eye on him while you go talk to security, she said, and I'll document what he told me in his chart. If anyone looks later, it'll be there. The hospital security office was down a gray hallway behind a door marked authorized personnel only. I hesitated before knocking, the little chart paper burning a hole in my pocket. Inside, a man in his 50s with a mustache and a buzz cut looked up from a bank of monitors. Can I help you? He asked. I'm Rachel Hart, I said, suddenly aware of how small and out of place I looked in my cardigan and jeans. My son is in room B12. A nurse told me there's camera footage from earlier that I need to see. His eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of footage? He asked. I pulled out the note and handed it to him without a word. He read it. His expression changed, just a fraction, but enough. Wait here, he said. He picked up the phone, dialed an extension. Yeah, it's Mike in security, he said when someone answered. Can you get down here, Sam? We might have a situation in PEDS. Parent request plus staff concern. A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s with a badge that read Samuelson, LCSW, walked in. Hair in a messy bun, tired eyes behind glasses, soft blouse under a cardigan. Social worker. Mike explained, briefly. Handed her the note. She turned to me. Ms. Hart, she said, can you tell me why your nurse thought you should see the hallway footage? I haltingly repeated what Megan had told me. Noah's whispered words. Mark's coaching. The argument on the camera, half heard, half guessed. Sam listened, nodding slowly. We take coaching very seriously, she said, especially around injuries. If a caregiver is telling a child to lie about how they got hurt, that's a red flag for possible abuse, or at least manipulation. And if your son mentioned being afraid he'd have to live somewhere else if he told the truth, she shook her head. She turned to Mike. I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I slipped out into the hallway and headed toward the nurse's station. Megan was there, entering notes into a computer. She looked up as I approached. Can we talk? I asked quietly. She nodded, eyes flicking briefly toward the direction Mark had gone. In here, she said, guiding me into a small supply closet/charting room and closing the door. What did you see? I asked, the words tumbling out. What is this about a camera? She exhaled. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she said. We're not supposed to get involved in family stuff unless it's clear abuse. But I've been a PEDS nurse for 6 years. I trust my gut. My heart hammered. Please, I said, just tell me. She leaned back against a shelf of bandage boxes. When you first came in, she said, I was at the triage desk. There's a camera feed that shows the main hallway where the beds are. It's mostly for safety, so we can see if a patient gets up or a kid tries to wander off. I nodded. About 15 minutes ago, she continued, I saw your husband step out of the bay while you were in the restroom. He looked around like he was checking if anyone was watching. Then he closed the curtain almost all the way. Her face tightened. That's usually a bad sign. So I glanced at the monitor. I could see part of the bed, through the gap. She swallowed. He leaned over your son, she said, his face very close. I couldn't hear what he was saying from the station, but I could see Noah's expression. He looked terrified. Your husband jabbed a finger near his face. Then I saw Noah start to cry. My hands clenched. I went in, she said, businesslike, just checking vitals. Your husband straightened up fast, all smiles, but I saw enough. Your son wiped his eyes really quick, like he didn't want me to notice. She met my eyes. I asked him. She said, casually, what happened to your head, kiddo? He opened his mouth, looked at your husband, and shut it again. Your husband answered for him. He fell on the patio. He said, very firm. Okay, I said slowly. But that doesn't. That's not all, she cut in. Later, when I was changing his pulse ox, I asked again, just the two of us, did you really fall on the patio? He looked conflicted, and then he whispered, Daddy said if I tell anyone I was on the wall, I'll get in trouble, and you'll be mad, and I'll have to live somewhere else. The room spun. He said that. I whispered. She nodded. I asked what wall, she said. He said, the high one Dad told me not to climb. Then he clammed up, said he'd get in trouble for telling. She took a breath. I can't prove your husband pushed him, she said, but I could tell your son is being coached to stick to a story. And when I checked the hallway camera playback from just now, it recorded that moment when your husband was leaning over him, talking hard into his face. The audio is faint, but you can make some of it out. Enough that security flagged it as concerning. I felt nauseous. You're saying there's a recording? I asked. Yes, she said. Our main lobby/hall cameras loop after a few days, but the pediatric hallway feed stores longer. If you ask security to pull the clip from 15 minutes ago from camera 3, they can. You're his mom. You have that right. Will they just give it to me? I asked. Maybe not directly, she said. But if you say you have concerns about someone coaching your child about how he got hurt, they're mandated to involve our social worker. And once a social worker is involved with that kind of allegation, she let the sentence hang. The implications hit me hard. If I made a report, this wouldn't just be between me and Mark. It could become a custody issue, a CPS issue, a court issue. Part of me recoiled. Another part, the same part that had been quietly logging falls and comments and bruises for the past year, sat up. Why the note? I asked. Why tell me not to say anything to him yet? Because men like your husband, she began, then stopped herself. Because some people, when they feel a situation slipping, escalate. They get louder, more aggressive. If he knows you're on to him before you have anything solid, he can say you're hysterical. He can claim you're making things up. He could even try to get ahead of you and call CPS himself, paint you as unstable. She met my gaze, eyes fierce. I've seen it too many times. She said, women doubting their instincts until it's too late. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. If that were my son, I'd want the footage before I confronted anyone. My whole body was buzzing like my nerves were electric wires. Thank you, I said, voice shaking. Thank you for telling me. She nodded. I'll keep an eye on him while you go talk to security, she said, and I'll document what he told me in his chart. If anyone looks later, it'll be there. The hospital's security office was down a gray hallway behind a door marked authorized personnel only. I hesitated before knocking, the little chart paper burning a hole in my pocket. Inside, a man in his 50s with a mustache and a buzz cut looked up from a bank of monitors. Can I help you? He asked. I'm Rachel Hart, I said, suddenly aware of how small and out of place I looked in my cardigan and jeans. My son is in room B12. A nurse told me there's camera footage from earlier that I need to see. His eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of footage? He asked. I pulled out the note and handed it to him without a word. He read it. His expression changed, just a fraction, but enough. Wait here, he said. He picked up the phone, dialed an extension. Yeah, it's Mike in security, he said when someone answered. Can you get down here, Sam? We might have a situation in PEDS. Parent request plus staff concern. A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s with a badge that read Samuelson, LCSW, walked in. Hair in a messy bun, tired eyes behind glasses, soft blouse under a cardigan. Social worker. Mike explained briefly. Handed her the note. She turned to me. Miss Hart, she said, can you tell me why your nurse thought you should see the hallway footage? I haltingly repeated what Megan had told me. Noah's whispered words. Mark's coaching. The argument on the camera, half heard. half-guessed. Sam listened, nodding slowly. We take coaching very seriously, she said, especially around injuries. If a caregiver is telling a child to lie about how they got hurt, that's a red flag for possible abuse, or at least manipulation. And if your son mentioned being afraid he'd have to live somewhere else if he told the truth, she shook her head. She turned to Mike. Let's pull it, she said. He typed something, clicked through a menu. A grid of camera feeds filled one monitor. Elevators, lobby, hall. He zoomed in on one labeled PEDS Hall 3. Rewound to the timestamp Megan had scribbled, 1439. There, I said, pointing, my throat dry. The clip played. The view showed our curtained bay from outside. Noah was a small lump on the bed, visible through a gap. Mark stepped out from the hall, looked both ways, then pulled the curtain mostly closed, leaving only a narrow strip open. The camera caught him leaning over the bed. Even without sound, his body language was intense. One hand braced on the bed rail, the other gesturing sharply. Mike adjusted a control. The faint, tinny audio kicked in, barely above the hum of air conditioning and beeping monitors. Say you fell. You hear me? Mark's voice came through, distorted but clear enough. Noah's voice was small, almost swallowed by the background noise. But I was on the wall. Do not say that. Mark hissed. You fell. You were being clumsy. If you tell them you climbed where I told you not to, they'll say I'm a bad dad. They'll call your mom. She'll freak out. She'll say I can't keep you safe. And then what? Huh. Noah sniffled. I don't want you to be in trouble, he whispered. Then you keep your mouth shut. Mark said, you tell them you slipped on the patio. If you tell any other story, I swear, Noah, I will make sure you never come to my house again. You'll be stuck with your mom all the time. You want that? The camera caught Noah's small head shaking. Then stop crying, Mark said, straightening as footsteps approached. Megan's, I realized, and his voice turned sugary. Hey, buddy, nurse is coming. Remember, just a little fall, okay? Nothing to be scared of. He stepped back. Megan entered the frame, all professional brightness. The clip ended. My legs felt like they might give out. Sam put a hand on the back of a chair, guiding me into it. Breathe, she said softly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. I obeyed mechanically. I can't believe he would. My voice broke. Believe it, she said gently. You just heard it. Is this enough? I asked, wiping my face with the back of my hand. To do something? I don't even know. To stop him from manipulating your child and putting him at risk? She supplied. Yes, it's enough to start. She exchanged a look with Mike. We're mandated reporters, she said. When we suspect a caregiver is coaching a child to lie about an injury, we have to make a report to Child Protective Services. That doesn't mean they're going to swoop in and take anyone away today. It means someone will look closer. I thought of courtrooms, clipboards, people in suits judging my parenting. Panic flared. I don't want Noah dragged through interrogations. I said, he's already scared. We'll do everything we can to minimize trauma, she said. But you deserve protection, too. If your husband is willing to threaten your son into lying now, what happens when the stakes get higher? When there's a custody case? When there's more on the line than a bump on the head? Her words hit a nerve. A custody case. It wasn't an abstract fear. A month earlier, in one of our many tense conversations about where this marriage is going, Mark had said, if you try to take Noah away from me, I'll fight you with everything I've got. My parents will back me. You can't compete with that. I hadn't realized then how literally he meant fight. Now I saw a picture forming. A man who would use his child's body as a source of bruises and his words as a weapon, all to paint himself as the safer parent. I have notes, I said slowly, from other things. Bruises, falls, comments. Is that helpful? Yes, she said. Very. When CPS looks at patterns, they consider history. Times the child has come in with injuries, what explanations were given, who brought him, how people reacted. I straightened a little. I want this documented. I said, all of it. And I want a copy of that clip. Mike shook his head. I can't just hand over footage directly, he said, but I can flag it, preserve it so it doesn't get overwritten. If there's an official investigation, we'll release it to them. And if your lawyer subpoenas it later, they'll get it. I nodded. Then please do that, I said. Sam put a business card on the table in front of me. This has my direct number, she said, and the card of a family law attorney we work with a lot. She's good. She understands this stuff. I recommend you call her as soon as you're able. I picked up the card. Anna Morales, family law, another name to add to my rapidly growing list of people I never wanted to need, but suddenly did. When I returned to Noah's room, Mark was back in his chair, scrolling his phone. He looked up, face briefly searching mine for clues. Where'd you go? He asked. Bathroom, I said. Took a minute. He nodded, accepting the lie the way people accept a receipt without checking the numbers. Noah's skin came back clear of bleeding. Thank God. The doctor diagnosed a concussion, gave us instructions about rest and watching for worsening symptoms. Can he still come to my place next weekend? Mark asked the doctor. We recommend minimizing physical activity for a bit. The doctor said, no sports, no roughhousing, no climbing. Quiet play only. As long as all caregivers can follow that, it's okay. All caregivers will, I said evenly, looking straight at Mark. He smirked faintly, as if amused by the edge in my voice. We drove home in separate cars. Mark dropped Noah off, gave him a one-armed hug, told him to be a tough guy. Call me if he starts throwing up or something, he told me, as if he were the one in charge. I'll come over. We'll be fine, I said. He paused. You're not mad at me, are you? He asked. I told you it was an accident. Kids climb. He knows better now. I thought of his voice on the recording. If you tell them you climbed where I told you not to, they'll say I'm a bad dad. I'm focused on Noah, I said. That's all. He studied me for a second, then shrugged. Suit yourself, he said, heading back to his car. I watched him drive away and thought, this is the last time he leaves this driveway, as if he has any claim to what happens inside this house. That night, after I'd settled Noah on the couch with pillows and a cartoon marathon, I called Anna Morales. Her office line went to voicemail. It was, after all, a Saturday evening, but the message said for emergencies, clients could text a certain number. I hesitated. Then I texted, my name is Rachel Hart. Social worker Samet County, ER gave me your card. She said you handle custody plus abuse cases. My husband coached my son to lie about how he got a head injury. It's on camera. I think he's trying to build a case against me. I don't know what to do. I hit send, expecting to hear back Monday at the earliest. Instead, a reply came 5 minutes later. Hi, Rachel, this is Anna. I'm not taking full details by text, but 1, don't confront your husband with the footage yet. 2, don't sign anything he gives you. 3, keep your son home until we talk. I can meet you tomorrow afternoon in my office if you can arrange childcare. If not, we can do a phone consult. You're not alone. Breathe. I stared at the screen, the words, you're not alone, blurring. I hadn't realized how alone I'd felt until someone named it. Anna's office the next day was brighter than Karen's had been in my imagination. Plants, a soft rug, framed diplomas from law school and from some battered woman advocacy organization. Anna herself was in her early 40s, hair in a curly bob, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt that said, "Mothers are not disposable." "I'm sorry you're meeting me like this," she said after we went over the basics. but I'm glad you're here. We sat at a small round table instead of across a desk, which somehow made it easier to talk. She listened as I told the whole story, not just the hospital, the bruises, the playground fall, the comments about custody, the quitclaim deed hints. She took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back, lips pressed together. Okay, she said, here's what I see. She ticked points off on her fingers. 1. Your husband has begun a covert campaign to portray you as over-emotional and him as the rational parent. 2. He's been quietly assuming control over finances and information. 3. He has now been caught on tape threatening your child with abandonment if he tells the truth about an injury. That's emotional abuse bordering on coercive control. She met my eyes. And 4, she said, he has been priming the pump for a custody battle, using falls and bruises as potential evidence that you're either neglectful or hysterical. Maybe both. Men in his position sometimes try to get full custody to avoid paying support or to control the asset, the child, as leverage over the spouse. I swallowed. That's overwhelming, I said. It is, she agreed. But here's the good news. You have something most women in this situation don't. Footage, I said. Hard evidence, she confirmed. And you have a hospital social worker and nurse already documenting concerns. That means if he tries to paint you as unstable, we can show a judge that professionals found his behavior troubling enough to report. She pulled a legal pad closer. First step, she said. We file for legal separation and temporary custody orders. Right now, everything is informal. That leaves room for him to twist things. We asked the court for primary physical custody for you and supervised visitation for him, based on the recent incident. I flinched. Supervised. I echoed. Is that fair? I mean, he's not a monster. He loves Noah in his own way. Anna gave me a look that was not unkind, but uncompromising. Monsters almost never see themselves as monsters, she said. They see themselves as victims of unfair wives, ungrateful kids, biased courts. I'm less interested in what he feels and more interested in what he does, threatening to cut off contact with a parent as punishment for telling the truth, using fear of losing his father to force your son to lie. That's harmful. Period. I looked down at my hands. I don't want to ruin his relationship with Noah. I said quietly. You're not, she said. He is. You are putting guardrails in place so he doesn't drive the car off a cliff with your child inside. She let that sink in. Second step, she continued. We formally request the hospital footage. In the custody filing, we note that there is video evidence of him coaching the child to lie. We attach the social worker's report and any notes from the nurse. We also attach your own log of past injuries and any photos you have. I thought of my notebook at home, the one I'd started after the playground fall. I'd almost been embarrassed by it. Now it felt like a lifeline. Third, she said, we don't play his game. What do you mean? I asked. If he tries to bait you into blowing up via text, we respond blandly or not at all, she said. If he accuses you of alienating Noah, we keep detailed notes of your efforts to encourage a healthy relationship within safe boundaries. If he shows up with crocodile tears about how you've ambushed him, we let the evidence speak louder. We don't get pulled into the drama he understands and you don't want to live in. She smiled slightly. Judges like boring, she said. They like parents who look steady and reasonable. Your story that you want your son to be safe and not coached into lying about injuries is boring compared to his theatrics. That's an advantage. I breathed out, some of the tightness in my chest loosening. Do we show him the footage? I asked. Eventually, she said, but not from you, from his lawyer, in a room where overreacting will only make him look worse. If he wants to argue context, he can do it with a judge watching. She slid a packet of forms toward me. "Are you ready to start?" she asked. I stared at the papers. Once I signed, there would be no going back to pretending. "Noah deserves better than this," I said. "That he does," she replied. I picked up the pen. Serving someone legal papers is rarely as dramatic as movies make it look. In our case, it happened on a Thursday evening, in our own driveway. We'd fallen into a pattern after the hospital. Mark came by midweek for dinner with Noah, acting like nothing had changed. I let him, for the moment, because Anna advised maintaining routine until the temporary orders were in place. "He doesn't know he's being watched now," she'd said. "That makes him predictable." That Thursday, as he got out of his car with a bag of takeout, a man I'd never seen before approached. "Mark Hart?" the stranger asked. "Yeah," Mark said, juggling containers. "What's this about?" The man handed him an envelope. "You've been served," he said, turning away. Mark looked at the papers, then at me. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" he demanded. "Dinner's getting cold," I said. "Noah's inside." He followed me in, face flushed. "Are you kidding me?" he hissed as soon as the door closed. "You filed for separation? Custody? Supervised visitation? What did you tell them?" "Noah, wash your hands," I called toward the hallway. "We're eating." Noah scampered toward the bathroom. I turned to Mark. I told him the truth. I said quietly that you threatened our son with losing his father if he told doctors how he really got hurt, that you've been coaching him to lie, that there's camera footage of it, that social workers are involved. He blanched. "You went to them about that," he spat. "You're going to blow up our family over one stupid comment. I was trying to keep you from overreacting. You always make everything about you." "It wasn't about me," I said. "It was about him, about Noah. He was hurt and scared, and instead of comforting him, you scared him more." He jabbed a finger at me, mirroring the image from the camera with ugly accuracy. "You don't get to paint me as some abuser," he said. "You're the one who—" "Dad." Noah's small voice cut in. "Are you mad?" Mark's face shifted instantly into a softer expression. "Hey, buddy," he said, forcing a smile. "No, I'm just surprised. Grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." I watched the ease of that mask sliding into place. Something in me hardened further. "We're eating now?" I said. "Come on, Noah." We sat at the table and talked about school and science projects, and which dinosaur could beat which in a fight. Mark tried to steer the conversation back to grown-up topics a few times. I didn't take the bait. When he left that night, he stood on the porch for a second longer than usual. "You're making a mistake," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." The temporary custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. It was held in a small family courtroom on the 3rd floor of the county courthouse. No jury, just a judge, a clerk, 2 lawyers, and a handful of observers. I sat at the petitioner's table with Anna. Mark sat across from us with his own attorney, a slick man in a navy suit named Caldwell who smiled too much without his eyes. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a twist, glanced over our files. Sam testified calmly about the mandatory reporting process, about Megan's concerns, about the camera footage. Caldwell tried to suggest she was biased in favor of mothers, since most of her cases involved men as aggressors. Sam didn't flinch. "I'm biased in favor of children not being pressured to lie about injuries," she said, "regardless of which parent is doing the pressuring." Next came Mike from security, who testified about preserving the footage. Then, the judge agreed to watch the clip itself. A monitor was wheeled in. The lights dimmed slightly. I watched her face more than the screen. She remained impassive through most of it. But when Mark's voice said, "If you tell them you climbed where I told you not to, they'll say I'm a bad dad. If you tell any other story, I will make sure you never come to my house again. Her jaw tightened. When the video ended, Caldwell cleared his throat. Your Honor, he began, this must be taken in context. My client was under stress. His child was injured. He feared being blamed unfairly by his wife, who has a history of what, Mr. Caldwell? The judge asked, her tone mild but dangerous, of bringing head injuries to medical professionals when she's concerned. He faltered. My client and his wife have had disagreements about her anxiety. Ms. Hart is not on trial for anxiety today. The judge said, we are here because your client was recorded threatening to restrict his child's access to him as punishment for telling the truth. Do you dispute that this is your client's voice and your client's words? Caldwell glanced at Mark, who looked pale and furious. No, Your Honor, Caldwell said reluctantly. We don't dispute the authenticity, only the interpretation. The judge turned to Anna. Ms. Morales, she said, anything you'd like to add? Yes, Your Honor, Anna said, standing. What you just saw is not an isolated incident. We have logs of previous injuries, notes from school nurses, and testimony from Ms. Hart about a pattern of Mr. Hart minimizing or dismissing concerns while simultaneously building a narrative that she is overreactive. We believe he has been laying groundwork to portray himself as the more reasonable parent in anticipation of a custody fight. This footage shows that he is willing to use fear and deceit to do so. That is not the hallmark of a safe, nurturing parent. Caldwell scoffed. With respect, he said, if every parent who said something regrettable under stress lost unsupervised access to their child, our courts would be chaos. The judge didn't smile. Perhaps, she said, but not every parent chooses that something to be a threat of emotional abandonment attached to a demand to lie about how they got hurt. She tapped her pen against the desk. Here's what I see, she said. Ms. Hart may be cautious, perhaps even anxious about her child's safety. That in itself is not a crime. Mr. Hart, on the other hand, has shown a willingness to prioritize his own reputation over his child's well-being. He intentionally scared his son into sticking to a story because he feared being judged as negligent. That is profoundly concerning. She looked at Mark directly. Mr. Hart, she said, this court expects parents to tell their children that hospitals are safe places to tell the truth, not spaces where honesty is punished. He opened his mouth, then shut it under her gaze. Therefore, she continued, I am granting Ms. Hart temporary primary physical custody. You will have supervised visitation twice a week at a neutral center, pending further evaluation and a full hearing. I am also ordering both of you to attend a parenting class focused on communication and non-coercive discipline. Caldwell started to protest. Your Honor, this is extreme. It is cautious, she said. My responsibility is to err on the side of the child's safety, not either parent's ego. She banged her gavel lightly. Court is adjourned for today, she said. As we filed out, Mark glared at me. This isn't over, he hissed. Anna squeezed my elbow. He's right about one thing, she said softly. It's not over. But he's learning it won't go the way he thought. Supervised visits were awkward for everyone. The center was a brightly colored building with cheerful murals and locked doors. Parents came and went under the watchful eyes of trained staff. On our first visit, Noah clung to my hand. Do I have to go alone? He asked. You'll be with Dad, I said, and there'll be nice people there to make sure everything's okay. I'll be right here in the waiting room. His lower lip wobbled. What if he gets mad? He whispered. I crouched down, looked him in the eyes. If Dad says anything that scares you, I said, you tell the person in the room with you. That's their job, okay? To keep you safe. You won't get in trouble for telling the truth. He nodded slowly. Inside, Mark sat at a child-sized table, flipping through a comic book. as if this were just an odd playdate. He looked up when Noah entered. "Hey, champ," he said too loudly. "Come on, let's build something." Noah glanced back at me one last time before going over. I sat in the waiting room, pretending to read a magazine while my heart rate refused to slow. After the hour, a staff member, a woman with kind eyes, came out with Noah. "Everything go okay?" I asked. She nodded, but her expression held something else. "We'll include notes in the report," she said vaguely. "If you have any concerns, you can always call us." Over the next few weeks, the reports painted a picture that both hurt and helped. Mark swung between over-the-top cheerfulness and sulking. He tried to coax Noah into saying how mean I'd been for taking him away. Staff intervened more than once. Mr. Hart was redirected from making negative comments about Miss Hart in front of the child. One line read, "Child appeared anxious when father raised his voice and physically pulled away," said another. Each report was another brick in a wall I hadn't wanted but now desperately needed between Mark's worst impulses and my son. Our final custody hearing came 5 months after the hospital incident. By then, patterns had solidified. Noah had flourished in the relative calm of our home. His headaches had faded. His teacher reported better focus at school. Mark, on the other hand, had acquired a file of concerning notes from the visitation center and missed several of his own parenting classes. In court, his attorney tried again to paint me as an alienator. "She has poisoned the child against his father," Caldwell insisted. "She orchestrated a public shaming using that hospital clip." The judge cut him off. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "your client's relationship with his son has been damaged. That is clear. The question is by whom?" She gestured to the stack of visitation reports. "These depict a man who spends his limited time with his child complaining about court, about his ex-wife, about how unfair his life is," she said. "They depict a child tensing at raised voices, exhibiting physical signs of anxiety when certain topics arise." She looked at me. "Miss Hart," she said, "do you intend to cut Mr. Hart out of Noah's life permanently?" "No, Your Honor," I said. "I want Noah to have a healthy relationship with his father, but I also want him to know that telling the truth is always safe, that he will never be punished for saying how he feels or how he got hurt." I took a breath, and I want him to see me choose boundaries when someone, even someone we love, shows us they won't protect us, I added. The judge nodded slowly. "Then here's my ruling," she said. She granted me full legal and physical custody. Mark would have continued supervised visitation, with the possibility of moving to unsupervised only if he completed counseling, followed the visitation center's guidelines, and demonstrated, over time, a consistent pattern of safe behavior. He exploded in the hallway afterward, insisting to anyone who would listen that I'd set him up, that the nurse had targeted him, that everyone was out to get him. But the system, for once, was not particularly interested in his tantrum. It was interested in the tape, in the notes, in Noah's quiet, consistent statements. Evidence. Life after court wasn't magically easy. Single parenting is exhausting even with the best circumstances. Doing it while occasionally checking your rearview mirror for any sign that your ex is about to try something else adds a layer of tension that doesn't vanish overnight. But there were also unexpected gifts. Noah and I developed a rhythm that was ours alone. We had Taco Tuesdays, where he got to design the weirdest topping combinations. We made a reading corner in the living room with blankets and fairy lights. We started a little tradition of truth snacks, where we'd sit with cookies and ask each other one true thing from our day, good, bad, or confusing. Truth doesn't get you in trouble, I'd remind him. Hiding does, even from yourself. He'd nod solemnly. Sometimes his truth was, I was bored all day. Sometimes it was, I was scared when Dad raised his voice at the center. Both were welcome. I also went back to school, one evening class at a time, working toward that counseling certificate I'd once let Mark talk me out of. It felt, right, like I was stitching some lost part of myself back together. One afternoon, about a year after the hospital incident, I ran into Nurse Megan at the grocery store. She was in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair down, pushing a cart with a toddler in it. "Rachel," she said, surprise lighting her face. "Hey," I smiled. "Megan," I said, "wow, it's good to see you without fluorescent lights." We chatted in the dairy aisle, catching up in the way acquaintances do when they've been through something intimate once and then disappeared from each other's daily lives. "How's Noah?" she asked. "Better," I said. "So much better." I hesitated. "I've wanted to tell you this for a while," I added, "but I didn't know how to find you. That note you gave me, it changed everything." She looked down, suddenly shy. "I wasn't sure if I should interfere," she said. "We're trained to report, but not always to directly warn parents." I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? But the way your son looked at your husband, I just couldn't shake it. "You weren't wrong," I said. "You were the first person in a long time who acted like my instincts mattered, like I wasn't just dramatic." She smiled sadly. "You'd be amazed how many times I hear that word," she said. "From men sitting where your husband sat. From women talking about themselves." I nodded. "Well," I said, "for what it's worth, a judge saw that clip. It made a difference. Noah spends most of his time in a house where nobody tells him to lie about how he got hurt anymore." Relief flickered across her face. "I'm glad," she said, "really glad." Her toddler started fussing. She made a face. "Duty calls," she said. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "You too," I said. As I walked away, I thought about how many small decisions by strangers had woven together to hold my life up when it was collapsing. A nurse slipping a note, a social worker listening, a security guard preserving a clip instead of letting it be overwritten, an attorney answering a weekend text. None of them had yelled or stormed or staged grand gestures. They had simply, quietly done the right thing when the moment came. It struck me then that my revenge, if you wanted to call it that, hadn't been about making Mark suffer. It had been about refusing to let his lies stand unchallenged, about building a wall between his choices and my son's sense of reality, about choosing over and over the steady, sometimes boring work of truth. People sometimes ask when I tell this story in pieces, why didn't you see it sooner? The control, the manipulation? The answer is simple and complicated all at once, because love and fear are both excellent at making you doubt your own eyes. I saw Mark rock our newborn and whisper, "I'll always protect you," and I believe that was all of him. I saw him roll his eyes at my worry, shrug off bruises, joke about my overreactions, and I told myself it was stress, not strategy. It took a stranger's note and a grainy camera clip to finally make the two halves of him collide into one undeniable picture. If you're listening to this and you feel that hum of unease in your gut, that sense that something isn't matching between what someone says and what they do, I hope my story nudges you not to push it down. You don't need a security camera to validate your instincts. You are allowed to notice patterns. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to protect what is yours, your home, your children, your sense of what is real, even if someone else rolls their eyes and calls you dramatic. For a long time, I thought strength had to be big. Loud fights, dramatic exits, slamming doors. Now I know that some of the strongest moves I ever made were quiet, answering an unknown number, reading a note, and not pretending I hadn't, walking down a sterile hallway to a security office, sitting in a courtroom, hands folded while a clip played that made my whole body shake, and not looking away. My life now is not a movie. It's school lunches and homework and bills and the occasional weekend, where I let my friends drag me out for bad karaoke. But it is mine. That, more than any gavel banging or paper signed, is the real ending to the story that started in that hospital bay. My son knows now that hospitals are safe places to tell the truth. He knows that if anyone, no matter who they are, asks him to lie about how he got hurt, that's wrong. And he knows that his mother will always choose the version of life where he doesn't have to trade honesty for love. If this story found you today, maybe it's because some part of you has been waiting for permission to choose that version. 2. Consider this your note, slipped quietly into your hand. Check the camera. Listen to your gut. You're not crazy. You're waking up.